High-rise fires are a matter of life and death. And as municipalities and local governments struggle with public safety budgets, a new study shows that communities considering cutting down firefighter crews may need to take a second look. When firefighters respond to a fire in a high-rise building, the size of the crew on each apparatus is the critical factor in quickly extinguishing the fire and rescuing occupants. That's the major finding of a large scientific study of crew size in high-rise fires, led by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The study measured the time crews ranging from 3 to 6 members took to complete a series of firefighting and rescue operations on the 10th floor of a 13-story high-rise. The NFPA 1710 Committee on Fire Department Operations awaited the results of this landmark research.
We've been waiting for a long time for this study. Actually, we had our revision cycle extended 1 extra year to wait for this study to be complete.
High-rise buildings, once the sole problem of big city fire departments, have sprung up in smaller cities and in suburban and even rural locations.
We're going to see more and more high-rises because, anywhere they can build, it's going to be a vertical footprint going up.
According to the NFPA, the yearly average of high-rise structure fires in the U.S. is 15,700. That's an average of 43 high-risk high-rise fires a day in the United States, plus more in Canada. These fires cause an average of 53 civilian deaths, 546 civilian injuries, as well as a $235 million loss from property damage. And more high-rises are built each year.
This study is a natural complement to the residential fireground study that we completed a number of years ago.
We're going to be looking at crew size. We'll be looking at 3, 4, 5, and 6-person crews. We're also going to be looking at alarm assignment. And this has to do with how many pieces of apparatus are actually dispatched in the initial alarm, if you will, and in the second alarm, and then a subsequent third alarm. Our third variable has to do with their vertical ascent, whether a stair was used or whether an elevator was used.
Because it takes them longer to get set up, smaller crews end up fighting larger fires and facing more toxic environments than larger crews.
When you get into these high-risk, high-level emergencies, you need more staffing as far as putting water on the fire out, completing the searches, victim rescue, and so forth.
The study concluded that crews of 3 firefighters start at a disadvantage compared to larger crews, and things just keep getting worse.
If you're working with a smaller crew size, it's going to take you a longer time to get your task accomplished. When it's life and death and there's fire, it's a matter of seconds. It makes a difference.
The study also determined that sending fewer engines and trucks, each staffed with 5 or 6 firefighters, was more effective than sending more vehicles with smaller crews, even when the total number of firefighters on scene was the same.
It was definitely better to have that 5. I mean, when you had just a crew of 3, you couldn't search as fast, you couldn't get as much search done effectively as when you have the other help with you.
The field tests were conducted in a 13-story vacant high-rise office building in Crystal City, Virginia.
This study, it's incredible how realistic that they've been able to turn this vacant building into a very typical vertical, high-hazard, high-rise fire structure. They've been able to do measurements with blind search and rescues. They're advancing 2.5-inch hose lines down hallways. They're actually getting water on a fire. We're able to do this in such a realistic way under very difficult circumstances.
No actual fires occurred during the tests. Fire and smoke simulators created realistic visibility conditions on the fire floor and the floor above it. The progress of the fire in each experimental condition was determined by factually validated computer modeling. During each experiment in the study, crews performed a series of 38 timed tasks, including fire suppression, searches of both floors, and rescue and evacuation of 2 victims. What you are about to see is a side-by-side comparison of how different-sized crews performed in the field experiment. The results are clear. Regardless of other factors, time to completion of all tasks decreased as crew size increased. 3-person crews took an average of about an hour to complete the fire response, whereas crews of 6 firefighters required a mean time of just under 37 minutes for completion of all tasks.
One of the things taken away is just how intense it would be to actually really fight a high-rise fire, the mental and physical fatigue that'll set in.
It's extremely dangerous, it's extremely labor intensive, and response time is critical in terms of getting firefighters there so they can intervene, and staffing, because you have to have an adequate number of firefighters to carry out these critical tasks.
A high-rise fire is a much bigger incident than a residential fire. It requires a lot more people and equipment, and a much more complex incident command.
Everything is complicated, and not just by one factor. We're talking much more complicated. There's really no good scenarios in a high-rise building.
The firefighters are swimming upstream trying to get to the occupants and get to the fire floor, and then the occupants are swimming downstream through the firefighters trying to get out.
In many high-rise fires, you cannot use an elevator, and you have to physically walk up the stairs, carrying all your equipment, carrying your air bottles and all the rest.
And remember that you can't just go to a window and get out. In other words, you're going to go out the same way you came in.
What about sprinkler systems? New high-rises are usually required to have automated sprinklers. However, these are designed to control the spread of fires, not to extinguish them. But the NFPA reports many high-rise buildings don't have them. 41% of U.S. high-rise office buildings, no sprinklers. 45% of high-rise hotels. 54% of high-rise apartments. And incredibly, 25% of high-rise hospitals and related facilities. Moreover, sprinkler systems fail in about 1 in 14 fires. Everything that the active firefighters on the fire floor and in the search operation use or will need has to be brought up to them. This requires planning and control, and of course, people.
If you don't support that quickly, when the firefighters that are on the floor are out of air and there aren't any replacements up there isn't equipment up there, you're done.
I, for one, had not really appreciated the need to have resources staged within the building, and observing the actual operation where we had a staging officer and had firefighters reporting and fire companies reporting to that staging officer, it became very apparent that someone needs to manage that very important part of the operation.
It's important to get the amount of manpower you need on the scene to evacuate your elderly out of the building. It's going to take you a little more time. So you have to worry about suppression as well as rescue.
The more people you have to search, the quicker it can get done, the more lives you can probably save or viable victims you can access, as opposed to just having 2 people trying to do it or 3.
5- and 6-person crews completed the search of the fire floor in a third less time than 3- and 4-person crews.
The larger crews can split into 2 separate groups and search both parts of the floor in parallel, thereby reducing the overall search time.
3-member crews took almost 12 minutes longer to complete all of the tasks than crews of 4, almost 21 minutes longer than crews of 5, and almost 23 minutes longer than crews of 6. The test results clearly show that the smaller the crew size of arriving units, the longer it takes to extinguish the fire and rescue occupants. The longer it takes to get water on the fire, the greater the overall risk as the fire continues to grow, exposing the occupants to more time in deadly heat and toxic smoke while waiting to be rescued.
If you get a crew larger than 3, you have 4, 5, and 6 personnel, the ability to advance a larger hose line in a stairwell is tremendous. So what that means is that we're able to get to a fire sooner before it gets into a flashover stage and involve multiple floors of a building.
The biggest take-home from the study is the more people you can bring to the scene in the first few minutes of the incident, the better you're going to be able to impact that incident. And that means save people's lives.
This gives fire chiefs another tool to use when they're talking with their elected leaders and policymakers on what is needed to combat fire in a high-rise building in their community.
Our intention for the data from this study is to be able to inform public policy, if you will, to be able to inform decision makers, not only at the fire chief's level, but also at a city council or county commission or mayor or city manager level, not only in FPA standards, but also building codes.
Now it backs up what we've been saying for years about how many people we need to do these tests, that we have a lot of heavy lifting to do, that it's not easy, that we don't do it with 3 people. It takes more, and we finally have something that says that.